Okay, so I'm still lining this piece and I was asked to go over my coloring process. I don't really have a specific process for that, so I'll just do the best I can. How I ink a piece kind of has a part to play in how I color. I like to... So how you color depends on what you're going for. I'm going for a very vintage comic style. So with that, I use heavy shadows in certain areas. When I say comic, I mean like American comics, and I kind of aim for a 50s feel. It's important to know why you do specific things in art and what you're referencing. That way you can better achieve your goal. I know a number of things influence me, like the Rococo era. Mangas are also a big influence. Recently, manhwas too. I likely mispronounced that, but basically Korean comics. I like how a lot of them, the artistic styles that a lot of them share. It's very minute things. Of course, not every comic looks the same, but due to geographical region as well as their influences, there are still going to be traits that they share, whether they intend to or not. All right, I'm making sure to add a lot of black in some areas. I like heavy black shadows. Not everyone enjoys that type of art style, but it's what I like, so that's what I focus on adding in. And for any parts that seem to go a bit slow, I'll be speeding those up. For this piece, I probably should have opened with that, about like what we're drawing. For this piece, I was commissioned by a client to illustrate their character and another character from what appears to be a comic. Dameron. I was gonna say Daimon, like the little manga thing I see a lot. The blue guy. I think he's blue. It was a bit tricky. From what I had to look up references and stuff, and from what I could see, it seems like he's also a real person. So it's kind of tricky telling what iteration to go by, but being a real person, everything I saw of him looked kind of the same. So I'm hoping to capture his face well in this. When it comes to drawing characters from media, if I don't have like a specific reference, it can be a bit tricky at times because I'm not quite sure what specific version someone may be looking for. Especially with things like comics, sometimes characters are drawn differently depending on what issue it is. So, line weight can also be a big factor in how you color. It's traditional for the line weight, if you're going to have tapered line weight and not one consistent type. It's traditional for it to be thicker on one side. Though I do want to say that if you don't want line weight, you don't have to have it. I used to get like critiqued a lot for my line weight when I was a beginning artist, and I never understood why, because I liked how my art looked and I still like it. And I figured out the reason why was because people expected me to have like thin lines and thick lines, but some art is intentionally one weight, you know? So that's why I'm saying that if you're an artist who wants to use line weight, be mindful of where you place that weight. But if you're not, that's okay. Unless the piece has a strong mood, I never go for an intentional light source. If it's meant to be more cover-esque or taking place in a neutral environment, I don't particularly focus on like having a strong light source. As long as the shadows aren't competing, that's all that matters. And I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Okay, so a good example is here. There would be blackness where his elbow is because it's meeting. There'd be blackness here, it's the inside of his clothing. There'd be blackness inside of his outfit. And I also have this strong shadow beneath her chin and beneath his. I thought I could slender up his face a bit. I don't always like for the jaw to connect. It's common to do so in art. I see that most artists, especially artists that I like, do it. I'm not a huge fan of it. Oh, okay, great. It was 2 separate layers. I was like, I don't like it after all. One way I combat that is I just add like these little lines here. That way it feels like it continues to go, even though it doesn't really. Let's see, and I feel like his jaw area is not flowing well. But yeah, all their shadows are going in the same direction. All their shadows are complacent with the objects around them. I'm gonna shrink his hand a bit here. And like, I didn't have the neck of her shadow just going in the complete opposite direction. That would imply a light source coming from the other way. And there's probably a way to go about it where it would look believable, but depending on how you go about something, you know. And I guess I should show an example. So like, if I drew the shadow under her neck like this, that would be very drastic. And it could technically work because they kind of go in the same direction. However, her shadow is so significantly large and overpowering that not only does it kind of focus the eyes on her face, which is not what we want, but it also implies there's a strong light over here. So for his shadow to be so small in his neck, it's like, why is the light only shining on her? Which would then make me think the light is above her head. But in that case, there should still be a very drastic corresponding shadow for him. So yeah. Speaking of that, I kind of wanted more hair over here. Or I guess a thinner shadow. No, I'm gonna leave it alone. Her ears are showing, and I believe that's what my client had. Let me double check. Okay, my client obscured her ears. Good, because her ears are showing, and a lot of people choose to have their ears showing with hair, but it didn't feel right in this piece to me. So I'm going to bring the hair down here and continue the hair down. I'm just gonna get rid of it entirely. I feel kind of bad because I did spend like a little bit of time on that ear, but if I drew it once, I can draw it again some other time. There you go. You may have noticed I didn't draw her eyebrows because her eyebrows are going to conflict with her hair. And since this is a shaded piece, I want to play around with them more, so I'm saving those for later. It looks like we have pretty much everything. Something I hate drawing, I like drawing it because I feel like I'm good at it, but I also hate drawing it, are fingers, hands, and feet. And I hate drawing these because most of us have the same parts, you know? For most of us, our lips look like this. Your lips may be a bit thinner here and there, but it's still gonna maintain this shape for a lot of people. For a lot of us, our eyes are similar shapes. It's just a line up top, something in the middle, a line on the bottom. And that can change up a bit, but no pressure. Sometimes the expression you make changes it, so no big deal. But with hands, I always feel a bit iffy because we all have distinctly different hands. And feet. And your hands and your feet tell a lot about you as a person. Does that make sense? Like, your lips, anyone can have a certain lip shape. But if you're an athlete, your hands will likely look a bit different than someone who is a patissier. I probably mispronounced that. Pisser. A pisser. But no. Depending on what your craft is, how you spend your days, your biology, parts of your body will look significantly different and can't be just like pushed beneath an umbrella. So I always worry about those parts. Just like a few little bits of schmutz here and there to really add to the texture of the piece. Oh, I just realized they have this person's belt down here. I'm looking at reference images, and the images they sent how the uniform is supposed to be worn, like the proper way, and then they sent their character wearing it a little less proper. So I kind of confused the two. What a dilemma. Some people have said that my lines are very smooth. It's because I use smoothing. I work in Photoshop, and Photoshop has a smoothing feature. When you draw, it's at the top. I like to set mine at 20, though depending on what type of mood I am, I may set it lower or a little bit higher. I remember when I didn't start digital art at this point, but when I took a illustration class in college, I went to school for art. It was a general university, but I went to the art school there. But I took a course in illustration. I remember our professor was going over digital stuff with us, which I'm kind of confused why he did that. I don't remember why at all. I think he wanted us to plan out our colors using digital programs. That way we couldn't say like, oh, professor, I can't do a color study. I only have so many materials. He wanted us to like use Photoshop to plan out our colors before we work on pieces, which makes sense. The part I said it didn't make sense at first because I really don't think he likes digital art, which is weird because you would think people are over that by now. But I'm starting to realize that he got accustomed to it as we all switched to it, but I can tell that he had a preference for traditional. It was weird. Like, I'd make so many mistakes in traditional art that I wouldn't have made if I had my digital sources back then, like painting and stuff. But he liked the mistakes I made with traditional over me achieving what I wanted with digital, which was a really weird thing, you know? Like, sure, he likes it, but I'm not happy with it. But anyways, I brought that up because he was showing us how to use Photoshop, and he was like, yeah, so these are the applications in Photoshop, and if you're using it and it's too shaky, you can use this. And he turned on smoothing and he put it all the way up, like 100, which is like way too slow. You could probably work with that if you're working on something very slow, like if you have like tons of time and stuff. And if that's something you need it for, but for what we're doing, illustration, we typically want quick, confident lines. And what's weird is he turned it on, he said, whoa, it's like making my brush move slower. That does not inspire confidence. I feel like if you're going to be advertising a digital program to your students, you should know as much as the fact that smoothing makes the brush slower, because it's like smoothing out what you're doing. It's making your brush drag more. So it was kind of weird. But yeah, if you work in Photoshop, I can't speak for the programs, but if you work in Photoshop, it can help to use that feature if you want smoother lines. Cleaning up some areas. And I'm going to group everything else I have here into references. That's what all these groups are. I just had like all my references and sketches stacked up. It was like references for how to draw a couple, references for who this guy is, references for mullets, all that stuff. But